My excitement for VR games is very different from my excitement for regular games. With VR, I'm not just looking for a good trailer, I'm wondering whether a game will actually feel great once the headset is on. Looking at the August 2026 lineup, I honestly feel cautiously optimistic. Not every release here looks groundbreaking, and I'd rather be honest about that than overhype everything. But there are a few games that genuinely caught my attention. So, let's get started and discuss the upcoming VR games arriving in August 2026. Ironforged. First game on the list is Ironforged, and this is one I'm watching closely because it seems focused on physical VR interaction rather than just flashy visuals. The combination of PSVR2 and PCVR support is encouraging, since developers usually have to think carefully about comfort, controls, and performance across different headsets. What interests me most is how weight and presence will feel during combat, because that's often the difference between a VR game that looks good in a trailer and one that actually feels convincing once you're inside it. Personally, I'm not expecting a huge blockbuster here, but I am expecting a game that could appeal to players who enjoy more grounded, hands-on VR action experiences. Battlegroup VR2. Next up is Battlegroup VR2, which immediately stands out because large-scale strategy is still relatively uncommon in VR. Most VR games put you directly into the action, whereas this appears to be more about commanding battles from a tactical perspective. That change in viewpoint is exactly why I'm interested in it. If the interface is intuitive and easy to read inside a headset, this could become one of the more unique Quest releases of the month. My main concern is information overload. Strategy games can become difficult to manage in VR if menus and units aren't presented clearly. Even so, I appreciate that it isn't trying to be another generic action title. It feels like the kind of release that could quietly build a dedicated VR audience if the controls are well designed.
Rogax, a rotten pit at the edge of the galaxy. A planet of gangs, hostile wastelands, and endless deserts.
Discovery, Rogue Planet. Just the title, Discovery, Rogue Planet, gives me strong exploration vibes, and that's honestly the reason it caught my eye. VR is at its best when it makes me feel like I'm physically present in an unfamiliar place, so a planet exploration game has a lot of natural potential. I'm hoping the focus is on discovery, atmosphere, and environmental interaction rather than constant combat. So far, this is one of the more mysterious entries in the lineup, which makes it difficult to judge, but I'd rather see a smaller VR game with a strong sense of place than a larger one that feels empty. Personally, I'm cautiously optimistic about this one because exploration-driven VR experiences tend to leave a stronger impression on me than games that rely purely on spectacle.
So slap on that sunscreen, put on those sun blockers, and protect that beautiful face of yours, because today is a scorcher. That ain't a joke. The pavement's hot enough to fry an egg, a hot dog, and the poor bastard trying to sell both of them on the corner.
Streets of Miami. Streets of Miami is the first game on this list with a firmly confirmed late August release date, and I'm genuinely curious about it because urban VR settings can be surprisingly immersive. Neon lighting, crowded streets, and reactive environments often create a stronger feeling of presence than fantasy worlds do. What I'm looking for here is believable environmental interaction. Things like movement through tight city spaces, NPC behavior, and how naturally the world responds to the player. The title suggests a stylish, crime-themed atmosphere, but I'm trying not to assume too much until we see more gameplay. For me, this is one of the August releases I'd most like to try for an hour just to see how convincing the city feels inside a headset, because atmosphere could end up being its biggest strength. Korea, IL2 series. Flight simulation fans have a major release arriving with Korea IL2 series, and this is probably the most specialized game in the entire lineup. What interests me here isn't spectacle, it's immersion. Sitting inside a detailed cockpit in VR can feel remarkably convincing when the scale, instrumentation, and head tracking are done properly, and the IL-2 series already has a strong reputation among simulation players. The Korean War setting also gives this entry a distinct identity compared with the more familiar World War II scenarios often seen in combat flight sims. I'm hoping the VR implementation receives as much attention as the aircraft modeling itself. A beautiful cockpit means very little if the performance struggles in VR, so that's the aspect I'll be watching most closely once reviews start appearing. SlipVector. The game opening August is SlipVector, and this is the release that immediately grabbed my attention because it seems to be built around movement first. Fast-paced VR games can either feel exhilarating or exhausting, so I'm watching closely to see how comfortable the locomotion ends up being during longer sessions. From the footage shown so far, the sleek neon environments and high-speed traversal look very different from the slower, more cinematic VR experiences that usually dominate release calendars. I'm especially interested in how the developers handle motion smoothing and spatial awareness, because those details can make or break a game like this. Right now, I'd say SlipVector is the August release I'm most curious about, not because it looks guaranteed to be amazing, but because it appears willing to take a genuine risk with VR movement design.
The gears of conquest are turning, and today, the debt comes due.
Battle Beyond the Wall. Okay guys, midway through the month we have Battle Beyond the Wall, another Quest release that appears to lean into larger scale combat. The title suggests a fantasy or siege-inspired setting, and I'm particularly interested in whether it focuses on cooperative play, strategic defense, or more direct action. What I'm hoping for is for a game that uses VR to create a real sense of scale. Standing near massive walls, looking down for fortifications, or coordinating with other players could be far more impactful in a headset than on a flat screen. My biggest question is how ambitious the encounters actually are on standalone hardware. Large-scale VR combat is difficult to pull off, but when it works, it can create some of the most memorable moments in VR gaming. Cubed. Cubed is the kind of title I might normally overlook, yet it's become one of the games that I'm quietly interested in because simpler VR concepts often end up being surprisingly effective. The name suggests a puzzle, construction, or spatial manipulation experience, and those mechanics tend to work very naturally in VR since you're interacting with objects directly in three-dimensional space. I'm hoping the game focuses on tactile interaction rather than complicated menus, because that's usually where VR puzzle design shines. What I appreciate most is that it appears to be trying something smaller and more focused instead of chasing blockbuster scale. I'd rather play a compact VR game with one excellent idea than a huge game with mediocre interaction. So Cubed is definitely on my watch reviews closely list for August.
Welcome to Isle of Food, where every ingredient begins with an adventure. Deep forests, clever traps, and wild game.
Isle of Food. Isle of Food is easily the most unusual title on this lineup. Food-themed VR games can go in many directions: cooking, farming, exploration, or social interaction, so I'm curious which of those becomes the main focus here. What I'm hoping for is a relaxed experience built around hand interaction and playful experimentation rather than strict time pressure. The Quest platform is a good fit for that kind of design because quick, approachable VR sessions often work especially well on standalone headsets. Personally, I think quirky VR games are important for the medium. They tend to explore interaction ideas that bigger action games ignore. I'm not expecting this to be August's headline release, but I can easily imagine it becoming the kind of game people unexpectedly spend far more time with than they planned. Puzzles of the World. Not every VR release needs to be intense, and this is the game that reminds me of that. The idea of solving puzzles inside carefully recreated environments sounds much more relaxing than most of the month's action-focused lineup. I found that VR puzzle games usually succeed when they make me feel physically present in a space rather than simply placing floating menus in front of me, so I'm hoping this leans heavily into environmental interaction. The title suggests a travel-inspired atmosphere, and if the locations are genuinely detailed, I could easily imagine spending time in them even between puzzles. These quieter VR experiences are often the ones I return to unexpectedly because they don't demand constant adrenaline, though I'd still need to see more gameplay before judging the depth of the puzzle design. Cards of Destiny. Cards of Destiny immediately stands out as card-based games are still a relatively unexplored area in VR. A physical deck is something we naturally handle with our hands, so VR has the potential to make card play feel much more tactile than a traditional digital interface. I'm especially interested in whether the game uses gestures, table presence, and multiplayer interaction to create the feeling of sitting across from real opponents. The simultaneous Quest and PC VR release is also encouraging because it could help build a healthier player population from day one. My main concern is content depth. Card games live or die by variety and long-term progression. I think this has the potential to surprise people if the social side is strong, because VR is uniquely good at making simple tabletop interactions feel unexpectedly personal.
What do you know about skateboarding? Viral videos? Skate parks? Tricks? Trendy streetwear? Maybe the Olympics? Yeah. But if you ask me...
Bomb the Hill. Bomb the Hill is probably the hardest game on this list to predict from the title alone. It sounds like a more arcade-style VR project, but I'm trying not to assume too much until we see more footage. What I'll be looking for is whether the game uses physical throwing, aiming, or environmental interaction in a satisfying way, because those mechanics often translate very naturally to VR. The late August release date also makes it one of the final major Quest launches of the month, so it has a chance to stand out if it delivers a strong first impression. Personally, I'm approaching this one with curiosity rather than expectation. Sometimes the smaller VR releases with the least hype end up being the easiest to pick up casually and revisit repeatedly.
Is this recording? The red light means recording, right? Where is this even being broadcast?
VRGS.
VGRS? Very Responsible Galactic Psychics?
No.
Violent
No.
Guardians Planetfall. Although Guardians Planetfall is currently listed for fall 2026 rather than August, I still wanted to mention it because it's one of the more ambitious VR projects on this list. The combination of MetaQuest 3 and PC VR support suggests the developers are aiming for a fairly broad audience, and the sci-fi setting immediately gives it a different flavor from the fantasy and urban games in August. What interests me most is whether it can create a convincing sense of scale on an alien world. VR tends to shine when it makes environments feel physically large, and planetary exploration could benefit from that enormously. This is one of the kinds of game I'm willing to wait for because a strong sci-fi VR adventure can stay memorable long after the initial release window has passed. Knights of Fiona. The final game on the list is Knights of Fiona, and this is easily the biggest mystery here because it only has a broad 2026 release window. The fantasy setting sounds appealing, but at this stage I'm much more interested in seeing actual gameplay than reading a description. VR fantasy games often promise immersive swordplay and exploration, yet the real test is whether movement, interaction, and combat feel natural inside a headset. The planned release on both PC VR and MetaQuest is encouraging because it suggests the project has enough scope to target multiple platforms. Personally, I'm keeping my expectations measured until we learn more. Right now, Knights of Fiona feels less like a confirmed upcoming release and more like a game to keep on the radar as additional footage and details emerge later in the year. So that's our look at the upcoming VR games in August 2026, and honestly, I think this month is more interesting than it first appears. Let me know which August release you're most excited for, And if I missed a game that's on your wish list, drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next VR gaming update.
Rock and roll. No brakes. Old school. More speed. The road. 60 miles an hour through traffic.